We all have a story, and that's something one of my sisters taught me. That we can't draw an assumption or a conclusion of what you think you know about people. Because until you know people's stories, you truly know where they're coming from. Because our stories shape us, our stories make us who we are. We can truly understand people a lot more when we know that story. We can see past the mask that so many of us put on. We can truly see what has molded and shaped us as people. And so this is my story. I came from a family of 6, raised by a single mother and an older brother that played the role of a missing father. I understand now that it was because she needed to work, she needed to provide. And so eventually, hiding out in bathtubs because there was a chance of our house getting shot at, guns under mattresses, and drugs being dealt in front of us was part of my life. It was part of what I seen growing up. And you see all that a symptom of a fatherless home. And I know my mom did the best she could. I know she tried her hardest, as best as she knew how, with all 6 of us. Growing up, my mom tried really hard to shelter my little sister and I because things were already difficult with my other brothers and sisters. She tried really hard to keep us away from making the same choices they made, but eventually I began to rebel little by little. In the beginning, part of me wanted to do right, wanted to make her proud, but at times I found myself fighting that. So eventually I just found myself doing that, which was done in front of me. A boyfriend in gangs, alcohol, drugs. They were all part of my high school years because it's what I had seen. It's what I knew. My senior year of high school is where all that changed. It changed in a sense for my family, and things were different that senior year. And I say changed because my senior year of high school, my mom came to faith. She came to know the love and the forgiveness of Jesus, and it was that senior year where my grandmother had also passed away. And you see, this is where now I don't see it that way. I look back and I'm like, that was God's hand at work. You see, my grandmother passed away that year, and the church was also out there at that same time on a mission trip. And so that's not coincidences that just happened. During that time, my mom was presented with the gospel, and she accepted, and she came back, and she was different. I didn't understand then, but there was something different about her. This is a picture I have of my mom during that time. She would be a woman at the feet of her bed praying, and praying out loud. And I would be there, I'd be sitting in front of the TV, what would seem like just not listening, but I would hear every word that would come out of her mouth. I remember just sitting there staring at the TV and just listening to her and what she was saying, and everything that was coming out of her mouth was being planted in my heart. When we think what we're doing, what we're saying, the prayers we're praying are not making a difference, they do. They really do. And so moms, pray for your kids out loud at the feet of your bed. Pray for them, because when you think they're not listening, they really are. And you see, even within all that, 4 years later is what it took. 4 years after her coming to faith, I'm sure 4 years of her at the feet of her bed praying. 4 years later, after the club scene, after reckless behavior, after alcohol and drugs and unhealthy relationship, I was in a car accident, one that left me in an induced coma. One that gave my mom very little hope. And one that doctors would tell her she's gonna be like a newborn baby. Like, you're gonna have to, you know, look after her. Like, you're gonna have to bathe her, you're gonna have to clean after her. They would tell her it would be maybe months before I would wake up. And even longer before I could walk again. But I remember my mom telling me that being a woman of faith, she believed, she prayed, and she had a whole church praying for me. And before we knew it, what was supposed to be months of recuperating literally turned out to be 2 weeks. I remember just getting flooded by the love of this church that I had never even met. I mean, people visiting me that were, to me, complete strangers. Just thinking to myself, why do these people care? Like, they don't even know me. And I remember the first time I met Hermana Betty. She was one of the women that came in to visit one day, and with a few other sisters. And she literally asked me, I mean, very bluntly like that, you know, she was like, if you would have died in that car accident, where would you have gone? You see, I knew of a God. I knew that there was, I guess in my own way, that there was a higher being. See, and I wasn't a bad person. I wasn't an evil person. I wasn't someone that, you know, just someone that liked to have fun and party. Hi, Katie. And I don't know, but for some reason, something inside me was like, not heaven. So she began to tell me of this Jesus that died on the cross for me, and you know, that sacrificed his life for mine, and that through his blood I could receive forgiveness, and that he could bring me salvation, you know, that he could fill that emptiness, that void that I felt. And if I'm honest, a lot of what she said to me in that moment didn't make a lot of sense. But one thing I was 100% sure of, and that was that I needed that Jesus she was telling me about. I needed him to fill that emptiness that I felt. And that was in November of 2008. It has been a process ever since. I remember making changes in my life, but also making mistakes and falling and getting back up. I remember just things in me started changing, like things that I once considered okay and normal started feeling heavy in my heart. I no longer wanted to do those things. Even after I was already in church, I found myself going back to my old self. Even after I had made all these changes and dropped so many friends, I found myself being the old me again. I remember during that time, my cousin came up to me and he was like, just called me out. He was like, what's going on with you? I began seeking help again. I began making changes again. I found myself having to fight the old me. And it's been a process ever since. Even till this day, still being in that process. It's a process. He loved me right where I was. He also loved me enough not to leave me there. You see, my story has a moment of redemption. A moment where I'm rescued. He rescued me from that emptiness, that void I would try to fill with, you know, friends, the club scene, the party scene, with drugs, with alcohol. And don't get me wrong, in those moments, you're having fun, but it's the aftermath. It's the feeling of emptiness afterwards that kills you. And that's where I felt myself empty. Is in the after all of that, after everything, after, you know, a night out. That was the most difficult. Having to return to your reality. The weekend's over, so it's what you felt you had to look forward to was no longer there. And that's where I found him, rescuing me from that, from the emptiness that I felt. He is the one that truly came and honestly, truly satisfied and filled me. That day 13 years ago when my mother decided to accept God into her life, that's the moment that everything changed for my brothers and sisters and myself. Because if it wasn't for that moment, I don't think I'd be here today. I don't think I'd be the person I am today. It's that moment 13 years ago when strongholds and chains in my family were broken. And it started with me. And that's where my faith comes in. And I know it started with me, but it will happen with my other brothers and sisters. So my question to you is, does your story have a moment of God's redemption? And if it doesn't, what's holding you back?